Hello and welcome back to CEO.CA's Inside the Boardroom. My name is James Petham and today I'm joined by Tom D'Orazio, CEO of SpayVac for Wildlife. I'm excited to be chatting with Tom today about a new sterilization vaccine that they have introduced as part of their relationship with BioVaxys. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks, and glad to talk about SpayVac any chance I get.
Fantastic. And I understand you're calling in from the lab in Madison, Wisconsin. Can you give us a sense of maybe a bit of the history behind SpayVac and your relationship with BioVaxys?
Absolutely. So the underlying technology is based on liposomes, and that technology was developed at Dalhousie University. It was spun off into a company that eventually was called IMV Inc. IMV Inc. was who we originally worked with, and BioVaxys took over the assets, I guess, of IMV Inc. And we were operating out of a laboratory at the University of Victoria in Victoria, British Columbia. Out of the generosity of the university, they gave us a small corner of a lab, which, as we scaled up, was no longer tenable for us. And at that point, we decided to move our laboratory operations to Madison, Wisconsin.
And you put out a press release this week outlining the new facilities and production capabilities for this new technology that you've developed, this sterilization vaccine. It's an interesting development, one that many people might not be aware of the need for. Can you walk us through a bit of the history? How was this developed? And then how might it be used commercially?
Sure. Originally, it was tested in seals in Nova Scotia, and it had phenomenal results. The goal was to make the female seals infertile. And immunocontraception is the term that's used by immunologists to describe vaccinating someone, or an animal, I should say, for the purpose of making that animal incapable of reproducing. The beauty of immunocontraception, or the approach of vaccinating, is if you can get this done with one single injection, you have a very minimally invasive way of sterilizing an animal. You can eliminate surgery, or continually administering chemical birth control, or killing them to try to control their populations. And so this is really the secret to the success of this vaccine, is that every study we've done is a no booster study, and we get multi-years of effect. And that is because we're using this great technology that we've licensed from BioVaxys. It's called a liposomal nanoparticle, which just means it's a fat ball. And but I'm understating the technology. There's a lot of know-how and technique, and it's proprietary on how you construct these vaccines using this technology. But the beauty of it is they do a phenomenal job of presenting the active ingredient, which we call an antigen, to the immune system so that it develops the little defense mechanisms inside the body called antibodies. And because of this, you get a robust immune response that endures for a long period of time. And that's what really makes this unique. If you had to go back and give boosters to these animals, there's really not a market for the product in that case. So the single dose, no booster vaccine unlocks all the potential in the animal markets.
Great. Thank you very much for that overview. There are a couple of points I want to pick up on there. The agreement with BioVaxys and the market size. So let's start with BioVaxys. What are the kind of financial terms of this relationship, as the product starts to scale?
Yeah, so we have exclusive global rights to develop the product in immunocontraception, and there is a carve-out in that for beef cattle. Other than that, we have exclusive rights to operate using their technology, and we will pay them a single-digit royalty upon net sales when it comes to market.
Okay, great. And you mentioned cattle then, and I guess that's a good segue into my next question, which was really how do you envision this technology being used? Obviously, a lot of people with pets understand, the arduous process there to get your dog or your cat spayed. And so I imagine there's a significant market there. But is there also a commercial agricultural market? Are there other lucrative markets where this technology might come in valuable?
Absolutely. You just go back to the history of humanity and animals. We've been trying to control animal birth for 6,000 years. And we've used the same methods typically in terms of preventing it. It's usually been surgery or separation, translocation, meaning relocating them. And what kind of animals do we as humans do this on? Virtually every category. We look at the market in roughly 5 segments. So the first one I'll call pest control. That is feral, invasive, and just wildlife that is in a habitat where typically because of human encroachment, it can no longer sustain the population. So we try very hard to control those populations. So that's I'll call that bucket number one. The second segment I'll talk about is aquaculture. And right now there is not a good way to control birth rates in aquaculture. And aquaculture wants to keep a couple of things. You want the breeding stock separate from the production stock. You don't want the DNA mixing there and watering down the value of the breeding stock. You also want the production stock gaining as much weight as possible. If they're spawning or producing eggs, they're not gaining as much weight. Now, one of the challenges in aquaculture is most fish, you can't tell the difference between a male and a female easily just by looking at them. Some species, but the ones that the rainbow trout and the farm-raised Atlantic salmon are probably 2 of the biggest targets in that aquaculture market. When they're young, it's very difficult to tell the difference between a male and a female. So there is not a good way right now. So that's the second segment. The third segment are agricultural production animals. So that's beef cattle, which I've already mentioned. Goats and sheep are the 3 most common around the world food production animals. Exact same challenge as in aquaculture. You want your breeding stock separate and from your production stock, and pregnant animals do not gain as much weight. Lactating animals do not gain as much weight. So to prevent pregnancy in those populations, in some parts of the world where it's hard to separate the cattle by sex, they'll spay the females and castrate the males. Separation is used where it can be used. And a third method in some places, chemical birth control is used, although that's controversial in some parts of the world. So there's definitely a need among those 3 production species that I mentioned there. So then there's 2 other buckets, and these 2 overlap a bit. And this has to do with dogs and cats. So there's a segment of the dog and cat market that we'll call pest control. Feral cats and feral dogs are a big problem around the world. I'll give you a couple examples here. India has an estimated 35 million. The feral dogs are referred to as street dogs in India. And because of a lot of the cultural implications in India, cruelty to animals is always a very hot topic. And doing surgery on the animals for the sake of making them sterile is a non-starter almost in many parts of India. Therefore, you have this proliferation of these street dogs without a good possibility. India still has over 20,000 deaths a year due to rabies. The primary vector are through dog bites. So there's an acute need in a country like India. All over third world, there are castration and spaying programs for feral dogs, and they're returned. They're vaccinated for rabies as well. We would plug beautifully into those programs. And you could get more dogs done if you weren't having to do surgery on them, because you don't have to care. There isn't any post-surgical care after a vaccine. So there's a great opportunity there. Feral cats. Also, one of the biggest problems we have around the world with invasive species are actually feral cats. Take Australia. They are concerned about several species being extincted in the next decade by feral cats. They're so desperate to solve the problem, a program was launched to poison 5 million feral cats, which is a really bad idea, but it's the worst alternative for them. The reason it's a bad idea is they become poisonous carry-on. This gets into the food chain, and it has an off-target species effect. Not to mention, a lot of people would argue it's very inhumane to poison these cats with, often they use poison sausages that the cats are drawn to, and they'll eat them. So you can take a feral cat population and reduce its birth rate significantly if you could vaccinate them. In many parts of the world, there are trap, spay, neuter, vaccinate, release programs for cats. For example, City of Phoenix is budgeting several $1 million over the next 5 years to do surgery on feral cats. In the United States alone, there are over 330 municipalities that have similar programs for doing surgery on sterile cats. Again, you can do it much cheaper and get many more cats through with an effective vaccine. And then the last bucket are companion animals. And there are parts of the world where spaying and neutering rates are low, and the vaccine would be a great alternative in those areas. Also, another niche for this would be in shelters. So many shelters require that the animal is sterilized. However, because of throughput and the lack of veterinary care available, most of the animals are adopted, and with a promise that you will go to a veterinarian, and here's a certificate you bring to either get a subsidy or get the surgery paid for. So we could get those infertility rates up if every shelter animal were vaccinated. You can still do the surgical intervention if there were health benefits to that. But this way you would ensure that, no irresponsible pet owners slip through the cracks without sterilizing the animal. So those are the 5 areas. Pest control, aquaculture, agriculture, production animals, and then this kind of 2 areas of companion animals, the feral ones and the owned pets. Now, how big are these markets? They're huge. You almost can't imagine how big they are. Every continent in the world except for Antarctica has problems with invasive species and overabundant species. We define the addressable portion of the market as places that either have a lot of regulatory pressure or where the pens are in areas where it would be easy for an escaped population to get out and get established. So there's probably parts of the aquaculture sphere where the pressure to use our product is lower. So that's a big market. Then if we look at agriculture, if you look at sheep, goats, and cattle around the world, that you have, again, 100 million head of animals for meat production turning over. So there's a tremendous opportunity there, again, worth well north of $100 million a year. And then the feral cat and dog market is quite large as well. We think between them, they're probably worth $50 million a year. And the companion animal market, right now, we do not bake that into our forecast just because the development pathway is a little longer, and our forecast window is 5 years, and we would expect that to be beyond 5 years coming to market. But we also expect that has the potential to be as big as everything else combined.
Yeah, let's talk a bit more about that development pathway. So,
Sure.
Really appreciate this overview of the market size there, and I think interesting to see the various different applications. But just to wrap up this interview, can we talk about what comes next? Now that the facilities in Wisconsin are up and running, what does the path ahead look like, and how do we get this into a commercially available product?
Okay, so step one, right now we have begun our regulatory filing for pest control in the U.S., and we're going to soon file in other markets around the world. Australia is our second priority. India is our third priority. The EU is our fourth priority. We'll take our dossier and format it for processing in those markets. And in the U.S. and Australia, this is considered pest control, basically. So that's the first segment we'll go for. We've got the most data there, and there's money that on the table. We can get to market most quickly there. The second one is to go into the aquaculture and production animals. We currently have trials running in aquaculture. We're looking for a partner for other agricultural production animals so that we can get that data together. We're very fortunate. The development cycle for us will be fast. We already know the dosing, the safety, and the efficacy from all the work we've done over the years in the pest control. So we can go to basically what are called pivotal trials. We don't need to go through the dose ranging and do we need to give a booster and all the things you typically do in vaccine development. So we can go right to a pivotal trial and apply to and in the US, which would be the first market we'd probably apply to, the vaccines are regulated by the USDA in that category of animals. And then the longer term development, we'd really like to partner with someone for the companion animals, especially someone who might already have a rabies vaccine, because we see this as a bivalent. We'd like to develop a bivalent vaccine as well, meaning you've put 2 active ingredients in. You could give the rabies and the fertility control in 1 dose. And that would be very attractive, especially in the feral animal market that I was describing earlier.
Well, Tom, thank you very much for that overview. Really interesting to hear more about SpayVac, the market size, the opportunity there. Sounds like there's an exciting future ahead, and looking forward to having more updates over the coming year.
Great. It's a wonderful product, and it's a product the world needs. It's worked, and it's patented. So it's got a lot going for it.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, thanks so much for joining us today.
All right. Thank you.